Thank you, Timothy, and I would like to thank my fellow panelists. Um, I think it is important, perhaps, to state what is the same and what is different
Yes.
from M23 version 1 to M23 version 2. And I think we get lost if we run with the grammar and the nomenclature, giving us the container and forgetting to kind of decipher what is the content there. And I'd like to start by stating that there is something different from M23 version 1 to M23 version 2. Picking up from my paternal uncle is here. This is my paternal uncle, Honorable Chionga, who gave us something of a hint worth really stopping over. When Honorable Chionga was at Munyonyo in 2012 in the Kampala talks with my maternal uncle, the late Malumalu. I had two uncles in that room. The Kampala talks of M23 version 1 under the auspices of Uganda, headed by the able leadership of Dr. Chionga himself here. The Congolese delegation was headed by the late Malumalu, my maternal uncle. So they were discussing a different animal, far different from this current animal. And I want to clarify the two different animals there. We still do not understand its genome and its phenotype, but it has the same phenotype, but its genotype is probably very different. The M23 version 1 is a resulting offshoot of perhaps what CNDP had been. We have a story of how we should get rid of Mobutu. How we should get rid of Mobutu start with the Lemera Accords that eventually bring together, and they call it alliance as well. It's a very interesting word. We have an ADF, which calls itself Alliance of Democratic Forces. A decade before, this ADF became really a menace. There has been also another alliance of democratic forces for the liberation of the Congo. That is the alliance that brought together a potluck of different forces united by one thing: Mobutu must go, and disunited in purpose, so that we do what? Chief among those forces were remnants of those who had already gotten exposed to the war, which started the civil war, post-NRA, getting into Rwanda to eventually put an end to the Habyarimana regime that has gone on into genocide. A very good chunk coming from Kinyarwanda-speaking people from the south of Kivu, and few from the north, call them the Banyamulenge. But this one was just from the Itombe Hills. It is that remnant of the force that eventually constitutes the bulk of the Kabila army that led all the way to Kinshasa. Fast forward, we are in 1997, Mobutu has gone, and then we have now Kabila, who is now facing the question of, so Mobutu was the only thing which was uniting us. That's what we do now. You never had, I'm told that at Kisangani there was a moment, two forces, Uganda and contribution to the AFDL, as they call it, was, before you get to Kinshasa, build an army. I remember as I was very young, listening to that recording. There was a recording of President Museveni actually saying, Laurent Kabila, it is now very clear after Kisangani has fallen that we are heading for Kinshasa. But build now an army a la NRA cum UPDF that will be in charge of the state. they were too power gluttonous to postpone that. That's a big faux pas. That was the biggest faux pas of where we are. And I want to connect that faux pas to where we are. All the eyes were bracketed to take over Kinshasa. The council of those who have really been in the thick of building a state was ignored. So we get now to Kinshasa, and you have this potluck of forces only yesterday united by one enemy, but disunited in purpose. It is after Kabila is now getting into full consciousness that he is in charge. The next thing is, no, yesterday's allies, because of the allied forces for the liberation of the Congo, were looked at with an ugly eye as foes now. That was the beginning of Laurent Kabila Must Go project. Now, we were duped. The bulk of that force, again, composed of the Kinyarwanda-speaking people of the Congo. Remember, these have been very much around in the post-Lumumba secessionist force. We're talking about 1961 already. What will come to be known as the Mulele force, here, where people call the Simba, had a Kinyarwanda-speaking population there. It is the force that went on to put up a spirited resistance against the Shaba wars when the 70s, Mobutu is getting Belgians, Moroccan, and Eastern European mercenaries. It is the force that eventually put up against again the Mobutu's attack, still in Eastern Congo. It's the force that was mobilized to eventually get rid of Mobutu 30 years later. It is the force that will eventually retreat when the Kabila, advised by the new entrance into SADC, ridding himself of yesterday's allies from the Easterners. There is a whole political economy angle to that story, but we can talk about it later. They look to the Indian Ocean as the future of the Congo versus they look to the Atlantic Ocean as the future of the Congo. But quick forward, we get now another showdown that will eventually culminate into the assassination of Kabila in 2001, and then the Joseph Kabila coming in to take over this country, which is really in tatters, already divided for about 3 years between the east of Congo, de facto balkanized politically from the west of the Congo. It is the transition, which was the 1+4 formula. Kabila seeing, reading the conflict for what it is, political violence, and hence political justice as the solution to that. Devising from South African talks and city and so on, a 1+4 arrangement. That arrangement sustained the Congo, seeing it into the first, perhaps the second most democratic experiment in 2006. It was brutally aborted when the question which my uncle here is bringing forward, the question of reforms within the army pertaining to deployment came to the fore. So now that we have gotten institutions of the Republic, there is an entire presidency with the executive, there is the legislature with 2 chambers, there is a judiciary. Now the army too, which is national, supposed to be national in character. So later, they used to call it later, mix up the army. So we no longer have the army which has got this facet of brigades that are territorial and ethnicized. It was a very complicated conversation that eventually led to the armed wing of one of the 4. You remember there has been a rally for the Congolese democracy, RCD. There has been led by the Azarias Ruberwa. There have been MLC, the Movement for the Liberation of the Congo, by Jean-Pierre Bemba. There has been the general opposition by Zaidi Ngomba, and then the Kinshasa regime with Yerodia. It is the CRDC coming from Eastern Congo that said, well, we still have, it's a very fragile transition. We are not sure that the central government, the government is genuine about the unity, or is just about to swallow that's up. The military wing of the rally for democratic change in the Congo that plugged off, led by Kunda, to refuse that reform that was being tabled in 2007. And we saw the beginning of what we call the CNDP. CNDP calls itself the Congress, the National Congress for the Defense of the People. For the defense of the people. It went on for 2 years. Goma has been taken over by non-state actors before. This is the third episode. The first time is really on the threshold. CNDP reached Munigi on the threshold of the city in 2008. It was only stopped by the then MONUC, the UN peacekeeping forces, literally stopped on orders of Security Council then, which was beyond just speaking. But Goma was really taken over by CNDP. It is the accord that precipitated Kabila to really talk with the rebel that brought in the March 23rd accord that eventually brought in back the brigades of the CNDP into the army. But again, refusing a dislodgement, a deterritorialization. When that accord was eventually aborted, for a couple of reasons which we can go into, we saw M23 coming in. M23 was a reminder of CNDP, the unfinished business of CNDP, which is the unfinished business of the RCD, which is the unfinished business of the political transition of Lawrence Kabila must go. That is the animal of M23-1. A particularly different animal that has particular claims laying on the states. What are those claims? Among the things which I think Honorable Chionga is talking about are two. One is that facts on the ground suggest that the citizenship question in the Congo is ethnicized. That is one. And then two, the nationality question, which are not synonymous. There's a difference between citizenship and nationality. The citizenship is ethnicized. The nationality is biologized. Against those two important facts, the first time when that question brought its ugly head was in 1972 with Ebisengimana, actually a Rwandan national who ended up becoming the chief of staff of the Mobutu cabinet, influenced the law called the nationality law in 72. The nationality law said that our Congolese, all those found in the Congo by independence, 1960. 1960, that's the Congo independence. The previous law, which was being abrogated by the what's called the 1972 nationality law, was our Congolese, those who were found in the borders of Congo as Leopold's decree of 1885. The Nanda community, the Yira community, put in a spirited fight against that Bisengimana's influenced Mobutu decree of 72. It was the biggest debate. The debate was in the Goma provincial parliament. It went on for a decade, and later in 1981, there was a citizenship law that brought back the colonial law back to the fore. So when I say that citizenship is ethnicized, is that you enter through the Congo, just like many other, and that's the predicament of the African continent. You enter into the relationship with the state through your ethnic, if you like, your tribal homeland. That is the first big problem. The second problem is that nationality now, which is, and you know, the modern state has coupled the nation to the state. That's why we've got a nation state, which is our biggest malaise of our modern times. And perhaps later on I'll be asked to give ways forward, but I'll reserve my way forward to how we should really think of the states. But the nationality now was biologized. You enter into a relationship, you belong to the nation through blood of your father, moreover, biologized through the paternal lineage. Now, it is that problem which has been at the very back of the entire consciousness of those claiming belongingness to the Congo. More so, Kinyarwanda-speaking people who said, we cannot afford, in their wisdom or folly, to leave the only remaining place which you can call home and get into this assemblage that cannot guarantee our future. That was the beginning of M23.
Now, part 2, this one.
Now, part 2. Now, version 2, we see something that happens in 2012. In 2012, toward December 2013, the talks are going on. In 2013, a balance of force changes on the ground, and there is a military defeat of the M23. There has been a military defeat of the M23 with the whole Chanzo's attack, which was coupled with a political failure. So there's been a military defeat, and that military defeat just swept under the carpet the Kampala talks under the auspices of Honorable Chiyonga there. And everyone took leave. The Kinshasa government, the victorious militarily, just took leave of that. And we saw the talks which were really leading us to the political solution just being aborted by a very quick fix of a military victory. M23 went into the limbo. It went on. Kabila eventually dragged on.
Give information, military victory which was voted.
Which was very much externalized. Yeah, it's a very externalized military victory. I think that's a very important footnote to add there. It went into the limbos, eventually disoriented. That is what gives a kind of impetus to what these accusations are coming here, because most of the bulk of the forces ended up in these refugee camps here, transitioned to Uganda, disarmed here, taken up to different camps from the Kisoro to elsewhere, up to the northern Uganda. Sometime when I was doing research in the north, in the camps, I found remnants of them 23, and so on and so forth. We went into a limbo phase. It's not like the animal was done away with altogether, but just that the animal was so much perhaps drugged that it couldn't have any other effect. We see a rapprochement. Tshisekedi coming to power. Tshisekedi is sworn in 2018. Tshisekedi says, I want to do not more of the same. I want to dare something different. We see some particular courage from the Kinshasa establishment to look at the East as another way of engagement now. We see the Kampala, we saw the Kampala Kinshasa summits, business summit taking place here. We saw visas being, the talks about the visas abrogations. We saw even the Congo through the executive, without the parliament really pushing for the Congo to enter into East Africa. A rapprochement unprecedented that eventually brought to how do we deal with, perhaps with the Kisangani hangover of the dates. ICJ had already made this very clear. We saw the roads as one way perhaps of pursuing, Uganda's pursuing its economic interests and doing business for peace kind of approach. It is intriguing and worth also considering that it is at a time when we see the signing of the route Uganda to Goma, all the way, Bunagana of Uganda to Goma. We see our place here, Bodo Lubiria up to Butembo. We see Odaramachako up to Bunia. It is when we are talking about all that all rapprochement, a Kampala that is very much in bed with Kinshasa. We see Suja coming up here. We are dealing with ADF with bare knuckles. And it was 2 weeks after the signing, Makiu, of that whole thing. And a week after the announcement of the removal of the visa regime, that's M23 starts. Historical coincidence or the tree that is hiding the forest? I don't know.